Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Impressive Farmer webinar on the subject of cover crops. This webinar is part of our educational series designed to share with our World Tree farmers and the broader farming community best practices for growing Empress Splendor trees and similar crops, and to introduce different aspects of regenerative agricultural practices. The program has been developed as part of World Tree's mission to elevate, educate, and innovate for our planet. My name is Rita Frumholt, and I'm responsible for our farmer marketing program and other special projects here at World Tree. And today we're very excited to be hosting this webinar with our special guest, Dr. Ramdas Kanissery from the University of Florida. Ramdas is an assistant professor and leads the Weed Science Research and Extension program. His research is focused on weed control and herbicide use associated with citrus and vegetable production in Southwest Florida. The primary goal is to develop effective, economical, and crop-safe weed management practices, including the implementation of cover crops. His research with citrus trees is applicable to Empress trees, as they are grown in similar regions and in wide-spaced rows, allowing for the possibility of growing cover crops. Thank you, and welcome, Dr. Kanissery.
Thank you, Rita, and the World Tree for this webinar opportunity. So in this session, we'll be discussing about cover crops and its benefits for weed control and much more. So before going deep into the talk, let me take this opportunity to show you where we are located and what we are doing. So we are in the southwest Gulf Coast of Florida. Our campus is in a small town known as Immokalee, which is between two major coastal towns in southwest Florida, Naples and Fort Myers. So this region, Southwest Florida region, is a major hub for citrus production. It's one of the major citrus producing towns in the state of Florida. So I'd like to show you how citrus production, we are doing this citrus production in Southwest Florida, so that you can relate it to your tree production system, which is Paulownia production. So basically, citrus trees are planted in rows, and tree rows are kept weed-free. 5 to 7 feet on each side of the trees are kept clean from weeds, because that's where the maximum weed competition comes from. And we do irrigation periodically utilizing sprinklers. And in the row middles, as you can notice here from the picture, between the tree rows in the middle spaces, we keep a vegetation to prevent soil erosion, to keep the soil in place. So this is how a young citrus tree or a new citrus orchard, new planting would look like. And this is how a mature orchard or mature citrus grove will look like. And fruits are harvested typically once in a year. And this is a picture of a citrus tree with beautiful oranges, citrus fruits on it. So speaking about the weed management, as you can see, as I mentioned, the tree rows are kept weed-free. And this is an example of a well weed managed citrus tree rows. It's very clean, but the same spot photographed in about a month, you can see the weeds kind of grown there and widespread in the area. So because there is a constant supply of moisture and nutrients under the trees, whatever the growers are doing to boost the tree growth is going to boost the weeds as well. So it's a challenge for long-term suppression of the weeds. Weeds come up pretty quickly in tree rows. So why we care about that? Why weed management is very important in this tree production? Because it's going to compete for light, nutrients, moisture, and space. I would like to invite your attention to this picture. It's a giant weed. The name is pigweed or amaranth. It's pretty common in southeastern United States in several production systems, citrus or vegetables or several production system. So I just want to show you this picture because you can see how much weeds can suck up all those nutrients and moisture that should be otherwise available for your trees. So there is competition, and this is a piece of data I want to show. This competition from the weeds can impact the yield as well. So in this data, in this figure, on the y-axis we have harvest weight of orange per tree, and on the x-axis we have two levels of weed control. So you can see when you have a weed-free tree row, or when weeds are free near the trees, you can get at least 25 percentage increase in the yield. So competition from the weeds can really impact the growth and productivity of trees. Now, another aspect why we want to take care of the weeds, because many weeds can act as source of pest and diseases, not only in citrus trees, but in any tree production system. This is the case because we did a study recently and we found some of the weeds that are popular and commonly found in trees, citrus tree production, like Spanish needle or dog fennel or primrose. They can act as source of a pest in citrus. For example, this pest I want to talk about is Asian citrus psyllid, which is a very important pest these days in citrus because it's a vector or carrier for a deadly disease known as citrus greening that is kind of affecting the whole citrus production, not only in Florida but in whole United States. So we found that these weeds, Spanish needle, dog fennel, or primrose, when they are kept unmanaged in the tree uh, rows or in the grow areas or even in the perimeter areas like ditch bankers or irrigation canal banks, they can act as a way station or a temporary stop for this insect, this pest, psyllids, especially when there is an insecticidal application near your trees or things like that. They can come to the weeds, get food, and stay there for some time. And once the insecticidal effect is gone, they can go back to your trees and infect them. So it is very important to keep the weeds in check to reduce the competition as well as to reduce the source of pests and diseases in a tree production system. So that's why growers typically spend about 12 to 15% of the production cost for weed control in citrus trees. And for that, we have a weed control toolbox. I like to call this as a toolbox because there are several tools in this toolbox for managing weeds. So you can pick the right tools for the right need or right location, or you can even pick more than one tool and have an integrated approach. For example, in citrus, we do have a prevention as a tool in the toolbox, which includes mulching, where we apply mulches around the trees. It's not so popular, but still some growers do it, basically not only to prevent weed growth, but to add organic matter into the soil and things like that. Then another tool is mechanical or moving, just especially in the row middle. As I mentioned, we like to keep some vegetation in the row middle. So in the areas between the tree rows, we do moving to clip the grasses or the weeds so that a good and nice patch of weeds can be maintained to especially to keep the soil in place and prevent erosion. So another tool is chemical, and it's the most popular tool, not only in citrus, in many tree production system, herbicides. Chemical weed management utilizing herbicide is a very popular strategy. But and in citrus again, we use herbicides. There are several herbicides registered to use in citrus in Florida, and we use a boom sprayer that's been shown here to apply herbicide under the trees. So the boom will help to apply the herbicide in the tree rows under the trees without causing any drift of herbicide chemical onto the trees. And this is an example of herbicide application. This is actually herbicide wiping that we utilize in tree rows so that the herbicide will be applied onto the existing vegetation so that the vegetation can be maintained in the areas between the tree rows or row middle spaces. But those are the tools that we regularly use. But a very important tool I want to talk about in this presentation is cover crops, which is an example of a cultural strategy in our weed management toolbox, utilizing cover crops. So cover crops, um, the definition for cover crops, they're plants primarily grown for enriching the soil and for several other benefits. Basically, they are plants that's grown in the tree production system, not for any profit. We are not going to get a yield out of this crop, but there are several other benefits. So since there it's not profit, it's not growing for a profit in terms of yield. It's not a non-cash crop. It is an emerging practice in citrus these days, but it's been widely used in several other production systems, including a row crop production system. But in tree production systems, it is a very useful tool, and it's an emerging tool, especially in citrus. So this is a picture of a mixture of cover crops we planted in the row middle spaces between the citrus tree rows. And we are also evaluating another technique known as eco-mowing, where we move the citrus trees. Sorry, so, excuse me. We move the cover crops that is grown near the citrus trees, and we'll put the clippings rather than we put the clipping. You typically when you move grass or some weeds, we put the clippings there itself. But if you can make some modifications into the mower, you'll be able to put the clippings, add the clippings into the tree rows near the trees. So in this way, you can add a little bit more organic matter to the trees. So this is a technique known as eco-mowing we are trying in our project. But I want to show you a picture of a cover crop mix plant in a citrus row middle space. So as I said, there are several benefits of cover crops. For example, it can help build soil health and quality. It can retain the soil from erosion. Then it also helps to suppress weed growth, and it also improves biodiversity in the ecosystem. I'm going to talk about each of these benefits one by one. So soil health and quality. So one of the issue or challenge when it comes to farming is to retain the nutrients in the soil, especially in locations like Florida or where we have sandy soil. It is very difficult, especially we have a lot of severe weather events, heavy rainfall, hurricanes, and things like that. So it is very important to keep the nutrients in the top a few inches of the soil that so that it would be available for the crop. So cover crops plays an important role here because cover crops can hold the soil nutrients in place. They will absorb the nutrients into their tissues. They will assimilate the nutrients, whether it is nitrogen, potassium, or phosphorus, or calcium, macro or micronutrients. It's going to absorb it, retain it into their tissues. And when we terminate the cover crops, and when they are plowed back into the soil, when they get decomposed, that nutrients will be released back into the soil. So in this way, the cover crops helps us to prevent the leaching or the loss of nutrients from the soil. Apart from that, when we plow the cover crops back into the soil, it helps build the organic matter content in the soils as well. So improving the nutrient content, improving the organic matter content in the soil, it's all advantages all over when we utilize cover crops in our tree production system. Speaking of nutrients, let me focus on an important nutrient, nitrogen, which is a primary nutrient, which is very important for the growth and productivity of several crops, including tree crops. Cover crops can also help us to improve the nitrogen content in the soil. How? They will do this through a process known as nitrogen fixation. So let me explain what is nitrogen fixation. It's a process of converting the atmospheric nitrogen. As you all know, we have our atmosphere comprises mostly of nitrogen, but it is not available for them or utilizable by the crops. It has to be converted into plant utilizable forms known as ammonia or related forms. And the process where we convert the nitrogen, atmospheric nitrogen, into a biologically usable or plant usable form of nitrogen is known as nitrogen fixation. And this is typically done by bacteria known as nitrogen fixing bacteria or rhizobia bacteria. They these certain cover crops like leguminous plants, certain plants like leguminous plants, which can be utilized as a cover crop, This plant has this wonderful ability to support the growth of this nitrogen fixing group of bacteria, which is rhizobia bacteria, in their roots. So this is a picture of a nodule of the root. Nodule or small bowl-like structures, formations on the roots of leguminous plant. Here I'm showing an example of cowpea. Cowpea is a leguminous plant. So these structures are where this bacteria, the nitrogen fixing rhizobia bacteria, lives and then fix the nitrogen, convert the atmospheric nitrogen into plant usable forms of nitrogen. These nodules, so this when we utilize leguminous crops like leguminous plants like cowpea as cover crops, they will fix nitrogen. They will have nitrogen in their plant tissues or in their nodules, and when we incorporate these plants back to the soil, this nitrogen will be added to the soil. If you look more closely, this is a fun fact, into each of these nodules, one nodule can contain up to a billion bacteria, rhizobia bacteria. And the bacteria utilizes a protein known as leg hemoglobin to fix the nitrogen, or to convert the nitrogen. So this leg hemoglobin is another a short form for leguminous hemoglobin. It's very similar to the hemoglobin protein that we have in our blood, which gives the red color to the blood. So when you cut open the nodules in the roots of the leguminous plants, you can see this red pinkish color, which is kind of very similar to a blood. So this is a fun fact I want to show you all. But the bottom line here is, if cover crops not only can improve the soil quality in terms of nutrient content, especially nitrogen content, if you use leguminous plants as a cover crop candidate in our planting system. Now, retaining soil from erosion. So this is a picture of a normal soil, or if you think about a soil in a crop production situation, this is something you would imagine or envision, right? But this is what we have in Southwest Florida: beach sand. This is what we deal with in citrus or vegetables. It's sandy soil with more than 95% sand, and organic matter is really less than 1%. So it is very difficult for us to do cropping, plant tree crops in the soil, especially we get a lot of heavy rainfall. And again, as you all know, Southwest Florida is very popular for severe weather events, including hurricanes. So chances of soil erosion is very high, and cover crops can really help us, in soils like this, to keep the soil in place in locations like this. This is a picture of a daikon radish. It's one of the cover crop. We are utilizing this in our study. And this cover crop, daikon radish. It's actually very close to the radish that we see in our grocery stores, which we use as a fruiting vegetable. And in fact, daikon radish is edible as well. It can be utilized as a food crop, and it is being utilized as a food crop in many parts of the world. What makes it unique is its robust rooting ability. So it has this wonderful ability um, to improve the soil aggregation, loosening up the clay and hard pans, and it can hold the soil in place. Each daikon radish root can be grown up to 3 feet, and they are a very fast grower, and they achieve this depth in about 60 days. So this wonderful rooting ability this is an example. There are several other crops or plants that I can mention a couple in my upcoming slides, has this wonderful rooting ability and helps the soil, especially sandy soils or soils with less organic matter, in place and prevent it against soil, wind and water erosion. So suppressing weed growth, which I'm very uh, excited about as a weed scientist. So cover crops, again, apart from improving the soil nutrition as well as holding the soil against erosion, cover crop has this ability to suppress the weed growth, weed germination and growth. How they are doing this? They're doing this through a phenomenon or a process known as allelopathy. So for those of you who who are not familiar with this term, allelopathy interactions are present in plants when they release certain chemicals into the environment, and one chemical, one those chemicals that's released by one plant, if it's affecting the growth of other plants in the neighborhood, that's known as an allelopathic interaction. These chemicals, the plants will release underground through root systems and things like that. And also they can release it above ground through the air as well. Anyhow, when cover crops, certain cover crops has this wonderful ability to again release these allelochemicals into the environment through the soil or the above ground, they can suppress and prevent the growth of weeds. So this is a piece of data I want to show you where we're from our project. So as I mentioned, we are evaluating several cover crop mixes in combination with eco-moving on their ability to suppress weeds. So this is a data based on that observation. So this is a multi-location, multi-year trial, and you can see this is data from 2 years, 2019 and 2020. So on the y-axis, we have several mixes. We are trying different mixes of cover crops that including daikon radish, white clover, crimson clover, and buckwheat. And we are having the mixes, and then we also bring in eco-moving into this treatment. And on the last, you have no cover crop control. So in all the cases, it's pretty evident whenever we have our cover crop based treatments, the weed density was reduced. So we found more than 90% reduction in the weed density in the 2 years, which means cover crops can produce allelochemicals, or in some way, when you have cover crops in your tree production system, the weed emergence will be reduced. That helps the grower they can reduce the application of herbicide, and ultimately we are reducing the chemical footprint in our farms. So this is a picture from that study. On the left, we have a non-cover crop area, and you can see all types of nasty weeds there. We have guinea grass, black nightshade, and geranium, which are very competitive in nature and can compete with your crop. But on the right, we have an area, very adjacent area to this non-cover crop area. We have daikon radish. It's just daikon radish, no core crops, and this is the evidence for the data I've showed before. Yes, the presence of cover crops can reduce the weed growth in your farm. Now let me talk about the last benefit or last aspect of cover crop, improving biodiversity. So many cover crops, for example, the sun hump or radish, and many more, they have the ability to produce beautiful flowers with a plenty of floral nectaries and sugary syrups in there. So that can attract a lot of beneficial insects and pollinators, including honeybees. For instance, in our study, we are finding the cover crops attracting ladybug beetle, which is it's considered as one of the farmer's friend. It's a natural enemy of several pest species. For example, in this case, you can see the ladybug beetle feeding on an aphid, which is a pest and can cause a lot of disease, a lot of infestation and infections in the tree crops. So having cover crops can attract these natural enemies like ladybug beetle, farmer-friendly beetles, and in turn, they can feed on the pest and reduce the pest and insect pressure in your tree crop production system. And also, as I said, they can also attract pollinators like honeybees, which is also a very important component of our ecosystem, right? So now I'm going to talk about our project. So this is a cover crop project we are doing. We have implemented and maintaining in Southwest Florida in citrus production. So we are looking at the prospects of utilizing several cover crop mixes in citrus. And we have an excellent collaborative research team, which comprises of soil scientists, soil microbiologists, economists, and weed scientists. So this is how we do the planting or seeding in the raw metals in citrus tree production. As you can see, the mix, the cover crop seeds are added to the channels here. And this is a germination. and slowly the cover crops are germinated in the channels, and again they have matured. Some of them are in bloom as well. So as I mentioned, this is a mixture of cover crop. So it includes sunham. The yellow flowers are sunham. Then we have some daikon radish, which I have shown you in my previous slides, and we do have some ryegrass as well. So let me talk about some of the cover crops, individual cover crop species that are being evaluated. Ryegrass and oats, they are monocots. They are in the grass family. They are excellent cover crops. They prevent erosion and again prevent nutrient loss. We talked about this. They're excellent for grazing. If you're thinking about utilizing your cover crop as a grazing source, ryegrass and oats are a good candidate for that. So this is a picture of a grass, extensive root system of a grass that can hold a lot of soil. So this clearly indicate, yes, some of these grasses can be utilized for holding the soil in place. Daikon radish, we are evaluating this, and I already talked to you about this. They're fast growing. As I mentioned, they can form a lot of biomass in about 60 days, and all this biomass can be added or flowed back to the soil, improving the organic matter content in the soil. They can scavenge nitrogen, and they're a great weed suppressor as well. Buckwheat, although the name has wheat, it has no relation to our real wheat. It's a dicot. In fact, it's not a grass. It's a quick spreading, and it's a great for weed suppressor, and it has a very beautiful white flowers with a lot of nectar, which can attract pollinators and beneficial insects. Sun hemp, which I shown you in the video, that the yellow beautiful flowers, they have this wonderful ability to add a lot of biomass, and that can be incorporated back to the soil for increasing the organic matter. Generally, they improve the soil properties. Cowpea, a leguminous plant. Think about our nitrogen fixation. It's a great cover crop candidate as well. It can add nitrogen to the soil. Crimson clover, which is red in color, is again a leguminous plant, so it can also support the growth of nitrogen fixing bacteria because of its beautiful flowers. It can support pollinators like bees. So those are some of examples of the cover crops that we are evaluating. So before wrapping up, I want to give you some pointers that we have learned. And again, this is a learning curve. In citrus, as I mentioned, it's an emerging strategy, and we are also learning through our observations and studies. So I would like to share some of those points we have learned from our projects. So one important thing here, we need to keep in mind, what is our goal? What are we trying to achieve by utilizing the cover crops? Because as I mentioned, some cover crops are good for holding the soil. Certain other cover crops are great for adding nitrogen and other nutrients to the soil. Some are great for attracting the pollinators and natural enemies of pests. So set that goal in mind and then select the cover crops. Keep in mind that different cover crops accomplish different tasks. Then cover crop mixes versus single species. Most of our studies include a mix of cover crop, but there are growers who like utilizing a single species because they think having a single species, it's easy to establish, easy to plant and maintain and things like that. So these type of things have to be kept in mind. Then understanding the establishment. There are several factors that affect the germination and establishment of cover crop. For example, seed rate. You may have to play with the seed rate to hit the sweet spot for your location, to your soil type and moisture content. And many times we try to plant cover crop in an area which has been under extensive agricultural cropping system, including chemical application. So the presence of herbicides and other chemicals in the soil can impact the establishment of cover crops. It's really important to understand that your soil do not have a lot of residual content of the herbicide, and it has to be tested in advance before thinking about establishing a cover crop or planting a cover crop. Then soil moisture. What we are observing, again, you have to hit that sweet spot for soil moisture in the soil. So in many occasions, we may have to water the cover crop plant areas rigorously and religiously to make sure the cover crops are germinating and establishing. So those type of things have to be kept in mind. Then termination. Although we like our crops to grow, too much growth is not desirable as well. So we have to make sure to get the best out of the cover crops, we have to make sure they are terminated in a timely fashion before, you know, to get the best, to have that organic matter and biomass added to the soil. So make sure the cover crops are germinated, established, and terminated in a timely fashion. And most important of all, it takes time. We have to be patient. It's not going to happen in a year or two. It's going to happen over the years. But once you're able to successfully implement a cover crop planting system in your tree production, then that's all benefits altogether, as we discussed now. That's all I have to share. I would like to thank my team, Weed Science team, and also my collaborators in this project, and my university as well as the funding agencies here. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. I have my email and phone number here, my contact details here. That's all I have got, and thank you.
Well, a big thanks to you, Ramdas, for your very informative talk on the use of cover crops. I think we can all see the many benefits for both the trees and the local ecosystem. We also see that planting the appropriate types of cover crops can provide nectar and pollen for pollinating insects, and possibly food for foraging livestock. But of course, all this will take careful planning and a little bit of experimentation to get the combination right for your land and for your area. So watch for future episodes of the Impressive Farmer webinar series to learn more about the possibility of raising honeybees along with your trees, as well as raising cattle, sheep, and chickens, all of which will depend on growing the right kinds of cover crops to support them. In the meantime, if you have any questions or comments, please reach out to our farmer team via our website, worldtreefarmers.com. Thank you again, everyone, and see you next time.